This next election is critical.
I've taken on inequality, and I've fought for equal opportunity. And I can guarantee you that's the fight that I'll continue in the United States Senate.
Where I'm going to do a full forensic physics cyber audit of the 2022 gubernatorial election.
There's a bunch of bills that were put in front of Tony Evers, and he vetoed them all.
We will pass those bills again. The new governor will sign those bills, and she will sign them on day one.
You think it's bad now? The 4 Republicans that are going after me, they are going to make it worse.
This is a News 3 Now special report. Campaign 2022, Battleground Wisconsin.
And welcome to this hour-long special on Tuesday's primary election. I'm Eric Franke, and we'd like to welcome our viewers in La Crosse on News 8 Now as well. Absentee ballots have poured into election clerks for weeks, and now we're 12 hours from the polls opening in Wisconsin's midterm primary election. Polls open at 7 a.m., close at 8 tomorrow night. You can register at the polls. There are primaries for all of the statewide constitutional races, as well as some state assembly and Senate seats, and a few county races as well. But the main race everyone is watching, who makes it out of a primary sprint to take on Governor Tony Evers in the general election.
Together we are very powerful. This is a great American meeting tonight.
Tim Michels burst onto the scene late with an endorsement that shot him to the front of the polls. It brought Donald Trump himself to Waukesha to campaign on Friday.
And I'm telling you, we are going to have election integrity here in Wisconsin.
Not to be outdone, Rebecca Clayfish pulled in none other than former Vice President Mike Pence's endorsement just days before the Trump visit. Marquette polls have them neck and neck, setting up a battle between a woman who's campaigned for this job for years and a multimillionaire businessman who tried for politics once before in 2004. He's faced scrutiny for running for Wisconsin governor after having spent quite a bit of his time recently living in Connecticut and is pouring millions of his own money into the race. We'll hear from both of them later in this special. Meanwhile, in the race for U.S. Senate control, what for months has been a polite but intense battle between 4 main candidates, it has solidified in a head-turning, last-minute coalition.
We cannot go back to the old way of doing things. We have to come out of the pandemic better than we went into it.
Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes has long been considered the frontrunner to oust Republican Senator Ron Johnson this fall, but until just a week or so ago had his share of competition. Bucks executive Alex Lasry, pouring millions of his own money into TV ads, was giving him the closest battle, and then it came apart. First, Tom Nelson, Outagamie County executive, stepped down, throwing the few percentage points he had to Mandela Barnes. 2 days later, Lasry pulled his campaign, throwing his support to Barnes as well. That left Sarah Godlewski pulling her cord just 48 hours later. And from the shores of Lake Superior to the edge of Illinois, it's these 2 races that the whole country is watching. Whether on Capitol Hill or the governor's residence, it's here that the lives and stories of Wisconsin's primary voters, region by region, have a choice to make. To understand them, Naomi Coles went road tripping across the state.
That's a cold mango.
In the heart of Milwaukee, a cup of tea that owner Bradley Thurman and manager Jadati Denson swear you won't find anywhere else.
Born in Milwaukee, product of Milwaukee Public Schools.
To understand the man behind the Coffee Makes You Black shop, a community hub in the city's poorest zip code, travel back to 1968 and the Oshkosh 94, a group of African-American students who shut down UW Oshkosh with demands for fair treatment.
We sort of grew up quick. We started meeting as a group. We formulated a plan. We gave the university a list of demands that we wanted corrected. Nothing got done, so one day we decided, let's go as a group, sit down with the president.
It was Thurman's first venture into politics and adulthood. It's part of what drove him to found this coffee shop decades later.
The bottom line is really try to serve our community.
Where now, Jadati Denson helps manage the shop that kept him fed as a child.
The 53206 zip code itself is a food desert. I'm a living testimony to it. I used to come here almost every day.
It's here in the 53206 zip code that Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes was born. He's essentially now the only candidate in a U.S. Senate race that could swing Senate control. And days ago, he was facing a string of primary opponents that had people in Milwaukee split.
I guess people who are aware of Alex Lasry, and just solely because of his connection with the Bucks and some of the work that he's done. And I think the Bucks thing really rings huge, and that's not even really political.
The Marquette Law School poll had Bucks executive Alex Lasry coming in for a close second until what was effectively a four-way race unraveled after Tom Nelson, then Lasry, then Sarah Godlewski dropped out days ago, clearing the field.
The Democrats, I think, see this as a golden opportunity to take down a sitting U.S. senator.
Mike Boucher is a familiar face to Milwaukee.
Today
And for decades on the city's airwaves, interviewed the state's biggest politicians. This city, this county, is crucial for a Democrat seeking to win statewide, but there's challenges.
You have to win by maximizing turnout and votes in Milwaukee County, in Dane County.
There's a lot of mistrust and, skepticism in terms of, the whole political arena.
Milwaukee's north side is mostly Democratic, but it can be hard to motivate voters to get to the polls in the primary. It's a region with its own set of top priorities.
This community, by far, could speak to the detriment of the imprisonment of the illegal marijuana business.
And a community where you must win trust one at a time.
Being one of those examples of, the neighborhood in a good light is kind of what we're pushing towards.
That's the thing. Dane County has just become this incredible Democratic vote-producing machine.
Sitting in James Madison Park looking out on Lake Mendota, Nada El-Makashfi chuckles. She taped her first campaign video here. She's become one of Madison's leading young progressive voices in a town known far and wide as one of the bluest in the country.
A black mother who doesn't have to bury her children before they bury her.
Grew up in a really hardworking, working class, low-income immigrant household. And so that really pushed a lot of my kind of lived experience towards this progressive place in terms of political affiliation.
Her story began in Sudan, took her to UW for college, then propelled her into the public eye through a mix of politics and the force of an unstoppable personality.
I think a lot of people are quick to dismiss loud progressives, such as myself, and I'm very loud. They're quick to cast us as people that don't understand how to win, when in fact I think we have a strategy that is new and that is bold and that will win.
She's not shy about her Senate pick.
Someone like Mandela, his platform totes
And
this.
she and many others in her circles see him as someone able to bring an inclusive ideal.
Is an immigrant and has this ideal of America that I really would love to live in a society that lives up to it.
In today's political world in Wisconsin, you can never overstate the importance of performance in Dane County.
If a Democratic candidate seeking a statewide win can get Dane County excited for the polls, they just might be unstoppable. And that starts with not underestimating the way Nada and other progressives are driving this county's dyed blue tradition forward.
What moderate establishment Democrats don't see with our young progressive youth is that idea that their imagination is something that will bring them to the polls again and again and again, but you have to know how to meet that.
We've talked a lot about the Senate race, ground zero in national politics, but impacting statewide policy for years to come here at
I will
home.
sign those on day one.
An energized Republican push this primary for who will try to take back the keys of the governor's mansion.
Should Republicans win, you can expect to see a lot of policy coming down the pike that would have a significant impact on the way Wisconsin looks and feels in the future.
To understand their primary voters, I headed next to Brown County.
This area is fairly conservative.
It might be his full-time job, but selling farm machinery is far from the Pierre native Dean Rash's only passion. He's learned the lessons of local government as an 8-year alderperson.
Whether it's conservative or liberal or Republican or Democrat, if we're doing things in the best interest of our countries and our communities, that's really what it's all about.
He knows the land political analysts like to call the bow counties.
I mean, our roots are in paper mills in northeast Wisconsin. It's a very stable, blue-collar, hardworking communities.
Brown, Outagamie, Winnebago, traditionally a red stronghold, with more recent shifts to purple. In the question of Trump-backed Tim Michels or the establishment of Rebecca Clayfish, Dean has thought long and carefully about his choice.
And I think what's happening in government is we need more leadership like a Michels. And so my struggle is you've got an established name but she's also attached to an older regime that just lost an election.
Michaels came in late and swept to the front with Clayfish. But for Rash and several other voters I talked to, the Trump name behind Michaels may not be everything.
Honestly, I don't know that it has a huge impact.
For Dean, he wants one thing.
We should be able to sit down and listen and either change our opinion or voice our opinion.
His fear that political chaos is leaving voters closer to the middle without a political home.
It's about what's best for me, and we've lost the what's best for the country, and it's sad.
2010, Scott Walker, people forget Scott Walker lost most of Wisconsin to Mark Newman, but he won by a landslide in southeastern Wisconsin. So I think southeastern Wisconsin, especially in the Republican primary, is a big deal. And the question here is whether Rebecca Clayfish, who should probably do well in this media market, that's where she's from.
30 minutes from Kenosha.
Burlington is a town that my husband was born and raised in. And we're very involved with our church in town.
Nadine Strom is a wife, a mom, and an active political participant.
I have voted in every single election, primary or presidential, since I was 18 years old.
Protesting Kenosha brought political fears close to her doorstep.
My son was driving to Kenosha every day for his job at the time. That was very personal.
About 10,000 strong, Burlington doesn't often make the political map. It's in nearby Waukesha County where masses of red votes pour in, but it's places like Burlington where Rebecca Clayfish has spent years making her race personal.
In April of 2021, there was a school board election in Burlington that we got involved with. She came to talk to our small group, and not only did she endorse the two conservative candidates running for school board, she also supported them with money as well. And she did that in towns all across Wisconsin.
She had such a head start in terms of working doing all the small gatherings. Can that retail politics that she did month after month after month after month offset the impact of the Trump endorsement and the big bucks that the Michaels campaign has put into the race?
Nadine has followed Clayfish for years, and there isn't much that could sway her support.
I resonate with who she is. Trump coming into Wisconsin has absolutely zero impact on me making my decision. He does not know Wisconsin as intimately as I do.
Knowing Wisconsin, in all its regions, its colors, its stories, the issues its voters care about, and what's driving them to the primary polls. For News 3 Now, I'm Naomi Coles.
Well, we've got so much more for you ahead and a panel of seasoned reporters standing by to help make sense of the shifting political sands. Up next, what issues may define how you cast your ballot. That's when Campaign 2022 Battleground Wisconsin continues. Welcome back. Throughout this special, we are highlighting the people who are heading to the polls. What exactly is driving their vote? Catherine Merck took to both the streets of downtown Madison and to the latest data to see what issues matter most to people this summer.
It's been a long road for Wisconsin voters this year. I asked Madison voters about what's driving them to the polls this primary election.
Abortion, women's right to choose.
Threats to democracy.
It's also important to think about the climate, too. That's a huge issue.
Roe v. Wade, that's the number one. And just the state of the world, we've got to get it back to some kind of normal.
These are just some of the answers that Susan Yockey with the La Follette School of Public Affairs has been getting from people already. The school surveyed 5,000 Wisconsinites last year about what issues matter to them.
And for our Democratic respondents in the survey, those issues were oftentimes climate change, as well as income and wealth distribution. Now, the Republican respondents in the sample have different preferences. They really see different issues motivating them. For our Republican respondents were the federal budget deficit, as well as government regulation. So really feeling there's too much government regulation in society today.
Her data shows different trends from what Wisconsinites are thinking about now. Yockey says that makes a lot of sense.
So we're always going to have, shifts in public perceptions based on, the hot topics of the day.
But what's not changing? It's the type of voter that's got the primary on its forefront.
We know that primary voters tend to have been voters in the past. I mean, it's one of the really strong characteristics of primary voters. They tend to be pretty politically active.
The people I spoke with said no matter what issue you think is the most important, be politically aware when you go to vote.
Well, that's when you have a choice to find the best candidate to run against the person you really want out of office.
Just be smart, be educated, educate yourself, take the time to read about the issues that are present.
What's important at the polls now? It's just the beginning of a long ride ahead for these Wisconsin voters. In Madison, I'm Catherine Merck for News 3 Now.
And sometimes it's those issues themselves that are changing voters' minds on the party they're selecting. In a political climate more divided than ever before, some voters feel lost in the middle or no longer represented by the party they've been with for much of their lives. Tahalil Mohadin's talked to a few of those voters.
Heading into election season,
I've always identified as a Republican.
Edwin Paff is questioning his allegiance.
To be very candid, I'm not real happy with where the party has went.
He says he's turned off by what he views as the party catering to extremes and placing politics over public health.
Sometimes sacrifices need to be made. We hate to see business hurt, but we want people to be healthy.
Paff says though he stayed engaged, he's losing faith, and it's a feeling shared by others. Once his political adversaries.
I don't feel like I've abandoned the Democratic Party. I feel like, if anything, they've abandoned me.
Andrew Driscoll says in the last few years, he went from advocating for Democrats,
Campaigning, canvassing, going door to door,
to feeling completely unrepresented by them.
Neither party represents the working class of this country, I've noticed. My life over my 31 years has not gotten better economically.
Both Paff and Driscoll want to see an alternative, something independent libertarian Britt Grimmer has been calling on for years.
It doesn't matter which party's going to win. There's only a few types of people, like maybe 5% of the people in this country, that's going to benefit from the politicians that are there.
And election expert Professor Mike Wagner says he's right.
Modern political parties really serve their activists. They serve the people who are donating to campaigns, voting in primaries, knocking on doors.
But seeing a third party stand a chance is highly unlikely because neither Republicans or Democrats, the current lawmakers, want to take that risk.
They make it really hard for third parties to get on the ballot. They make it really hard for third parties to win elections. They make it hard for third parties to be present in political debates.
Still, these voters say they're voting with their conscience at the polls and thinking long term, even if it means losing now.
Garnish enough votes, 10-15% of the votes for a third party, it would make the Democrats understand that they need to start doing something.
In Madison, Tahlil Mohadin, News 3 Now.
And coming up, our panel of political reporters is breaking down just how unusual the Senate primary race has become, plus the proxy war between two of the Republican Party's biggest names. Welcome back. Breaking down the chaos of political headlines over the past several weeks, we have asked several longtime political reporters in Wisconsin to join us tonight. It is a busy time for them, so we please welcome Scott Bauer from the Associated Press, Jesse Apoyan, the Capitol Bureau Chief of the Capital Times, and Patrick Marley, who many of you may know from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, but has recently made his jump to the Washington Post. I know it's busy for you guys, so a busy stretch ahead of you as well, so thanks for your time tonight. Let's start with the Senate primary race and how this thing just cleared out. I mean, that seems to be one of the biggest foregone conclusions, Scott, for tomorrow as we look ahead to this. But have you seen anything like this where just everybody cleared the path for one candidate at this stage?
No, not this late, definitely, where you had 3 candidates, including one who spent, $12 million of his own money, dropping out 2 weeks before the primary. And all 3 of them, Tom Nelson, Alex Lazary, and Sarah Godlewski, their names are on the ballot. They foresee, will get some votes from people, but they made clear they were dropping out, supporting Mandela Barnes. It seemed clear they had seen some polling that made it clear in their minds, at least, that they didn't really have a chance. So they pulled out.
And Jesse, a lot of money of their own money, especially with Lasry and Godlewski as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that was a factor. When it's your own money on the line, you have to think about, you know, is this investment really worth it? Is it worth putting the family through something like this? And, you know, it started with Tom Nelson, who was raising his own money, but it did seem like it was a pretty swift decision once they, you know, started thinking about that. Interesting to note, though, Alex Lasry is continuing to spend against Ron Johnson, so he's taking that wealth and still putting it to use.
That was a big question, right? Is he going to continue to be that enthusiastic once we get through Tuesday? Patrick, do they have the candidate here to threaten Ron Johnson, the incumbent? That's a tough ask.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to find out, right? Ron Johnson's a polarizing character where there's his supporters love him, his detractors don't like him at all. You know, it's going to be a massive race in terms of the kind of money that's spent coming in from all over the country.
Yeah, get ready for the next 91 days. Jesse, let's talk a little bit about the dueling endorsements. We saw a lot of primaries last week. This was an issue, whether it was Arizona, Missouri, Michigan. We saw Trump, Pence kind of butting heads. We know what happened on January 6th. What has this been like in Wisconsin?
I mean, it's a fascinating dynamic. You know, we've been used to a Republican Party in Wisconsin that's been very strong, very unified for the last decade plus, and we're starting to see some fracturing, some fissures now, and you know that's playing out with that national proxy, with the Trump endorsement, endorsing Tim Michels. Trump's been really relitigating 2020, continuing to talk about decertifying the election results of 2020, while Mike Pence is going around the country talking about looking forward, moving the party forward, and he's here backing Rebecca Clayfish.
Yeah, Patrick, when you look at those dueling endorsements, we heard it in the piece we heard earlier, is either one of these like the new Republican? I mean, they're both kind of in the rearview mirror, but which one still has an impact with voters?
I mean, I think Trump has a much bigger sway over the party, right? He's got, speaking of people who have supporters that are very dedicated to him, Pence maybe not as much, and with Trump you've got some very strong detractors, including some in the Republican Party. I think the other interesting element here is you've got the Scott Walker factor, who's entirely behind Rebecca Clayfish. You know, continues to be a big figure in Wisconsin. So this is really as much of a standoff between Walker and Trump as it is between Trump and Pence.
Scott, did you watch this in other races last week and see how that kind of played out, whether it was Michigan or Missouri or Arizona or wherever?
Yeah, well, Patrick was in Michigan, so he might have some firsthand knowledge there. But we've definitely seen a split record for Trump in terms of his endorsements around the country. Win some, lose some. Here, he's only endorsed a couple candidates who are on the ballot tomorrow, and Tim Michels and Adam Steen, who's running against Robin Voss, and Janelle Branchen he also endorsed. But in terms of this governor's race, yeah, I think it's right. You've got Clayfish, who's got this support that has been there for a long time. Lawmakers, Republican lawmakers, law enforcement officials, and Michels really is running on that Trump endorsement above all else.
What do you think of the election integrity question here? I mean, is that going to be something we're going to be talking about? I would assume, you know, more maybe after November, but how much is this on the ballot? How much is this on top of mind of voters?
Well, I mean, it's been a huge issue in the Republican primary, right? You've got Timothy Ramthan's running, and he's got this platform of decertification, which is not legally possible. Clayfish says that's not possible, but wants to do all kinds of other things related to this issue. Michels, haven't been able to pin him down as to what he thinks on decertification, seems to leave open some possibility for it. But you know, there's a segment of the Republican base that is extremely interested in this issue. They've been talking about it a lot. I think one thing we want to watch after the primary, and as they try to persuade more swing voters, are they talking about it as much, and are they talking about it in a different way?
Is there a single issue aside from, this might be more also for November, but you know, you look at the abortion discussion. We heard that was brought up in an earlier piece as well, and we saw what happened in Kansas last week. How much is that going to be a driving force for either side here in November to the next 91 days?
I mean, I certainly think Democrats are going to be talking about it. What we've seen playing out so far is a lot of talk about that from Democrats, while Republicans are really focusing on inflation, the economy, contracting GDP over the last couple quarters, and that'll continue, I think, going into November.
Yeah, I think Governor Evers would love to make this election a referendum on abortion. It's not going to be a referendum only on abortion. It's going to be a referendum on his record and what people want to see in the future. But you can bet he will be talking a lot about abortion rights and what he can do as governor versus what a Republican would do.
What did you think about Kansas last week? I mean, was that completely shocking to you when you saw that result?
I mean, I was surprised by the size of the margin in a state that's as red as Kansas is, and I think that it's something that's gotten the attention of both Democrats who have been looking at a kind of bleak potential landscape for them, and the attention of Republicans who have thought they very well could run the table this fall. Maybe give them some second thoughts.
What are you guys going to be watching tonight? Scott, what's the first thing on Tuesday night? What is the first thing you're going to be watching as things develop?
I mean, obviously the governor's race primary is the big thing, and what is turnout looking like in the WOW counties, and is it strong for Clayfish there? Is it not? You know, I think that it's really going to be interesting to see kind of what the enthusiasm is for Democrats also, given that they don't really have this Senate primary anymore. And obviously the Voss race is fascinating down in Racine County, so we'll be keeping close on that.
Do you guys think that'll be a referendum on Trump in Wisconsin, just how much people are taking him seriously, really the big one? Or is it more about the individual candidates? I mean, Steen, nobody really knows much about him. Voss has been so key in Burlington in those areas.
I mean, I think it's hard to think of it as a referendum on Trump because it's just one assembly district, right? It's just a small place, and Trump came in really at the last minute here. No, like you say, nobody had heard of Steen until this moment.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think it's the focus on election integrity, like you mentioned. I think that's a bigger driving factor here than maybe Trump as an individual.
Parts of the state that you're watching with as the results come in tomorrow, in particular, Fox Valley, maybe?
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's always a swinging area, always interesting. Over the weekend, there was an Emerson College poll that came out that showed some pretty interesting stuff within the governor's race. Michael's had some pretty strong support in the rural areas, but Clayfish flipped that and expanded it when you're looking at suburban and urban areas. So, you know, to Scott's point on the WOW counties, where's that enthusiasm? Where's that turnout? And does that reflect what we saw in that poll?
Well, it's going to be a wild 91 days after tomorrow night. So I know it's going to be busy for all of you. So all of you, Scott, Jesse, Patrick, thanks for being with us tonight. We really appreciate it ahead of this very, very busy stretch. Up next, we will be hearing from the candidates themselves. Our political reporter, Will Keneally, sits down with Mandela Barnes.
Good job. There are more than just
Welcome back. Up next, we focus on the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate. The field of more than a half a dozen candidates whittled down to just a few in the waning days of the campaign with one clear frontrunner. Political reporter Will Keneally is here with more. Will?
Many of the big names in the campaign threw their support behind the state's current lieutenant governor, Mandela Barnes. Though he still faces a handful of challengers, he's the likely favorite to take on Ron Johnson in the fall. I sat down with him to talk about his campaign.
Definitely. So I first want to ask, you know, as you kind of introduce yourself as a candidate, I'm really curious, what was that one moment where the switch flipped for you and said, yes, I want to run for U.S. Senate?
Well, honestly, I don't know if it was a switch. There were a number of things. A lot of frustration. Some of the frustration with Ron Johnson specifically, but most of it being the fact that the Senate is so broken. The Senate has not delivered for working people. Too many folks all across the state of Wisconsin are being left behind because of inaction from the U.S. Senate. And the biggest reason why we experience that is because it's an out-of-touch place. The American experience is not reflected in that body. The true Wisconsin experience is not truly reflected in that body. We do have some amazing leaders like Senator Tammy Baldwin, but on the whole, there are far too many out-of-touch people who don't truly understand what life is like for people who've had to deal with rising costs, for people who've seen middle-class jobs leave the community because of offshoring, because large companies wanted to save a few bucks, but in turn have cost us all.
So the other thing we hear a lot from Democrats too is, you know, it's a big push to beat Senator Ron Johnson. Why are you the best choice to beat Ron Johnson?
The Marquette Law poll showed that I'm the only Democrat that is beating Ron Johnson with independent voters. Also, the strongest Democrat to take on Ron Johnson, according to that same poll. And this comes down to my lived experience. People all across the state know that I understand exactly what they're going through because their fears, their struggles are also my fears, my struggle, but also the hopes and dreams. And on top of that, I've had over a decade of service to this state. Delivering for working class families. And over the course of these last few years, dealing with the pandemic, people know that I've been there for them.
So I want to ask about your legislative priorities too. For example, when you get into the U.S. Senate, what kind of committee assignments would you want to see?
Well, I think two committees that stick out to me would be the Energy Committee and also the Agriculture Committee. Now, the Energy Committee, to continue the work to fight climate change that I've been a part of as Lieutenant Governor, the work that I've led in this state, and the Agriculture Committee, because we are Wisconsin, and we have a responsibility to protect our family farmers because unfortunately, the deck has been stacked against them, like so many communities, like my own. And when we make sure, when we prioritize our family farmers, we have stronger food systems, and that helps to benefit us all. We have so many issues of food insecurity in communities all across this state and all across the country, but the solutions are right in front of us.
So we see a 50-50 Senate right now. How would you imagine you working across the aisle with your Republican colleagues, or do you feel that you have an obligation to do so?
Well, this is a fight to expand the majority in the Senate. We see that 50-50 is too narrow a margin for us to truly see the opportunity that we deserve in this state and across this country. That's why we're fighting so hard to get those extra votes to end the filibuster. And I'm happy to work with anybody who wants to advance the cause of working people in this state. I don't care what your party affiliation is. If you want to do the work to improve quality of life for people in this state and this country, let's have that conversation and let's get to work.
So as we look ahead to the fall, a Marquette Law School poll taken in June shows Barn has a slight lead over incumbent Ron Johnson in a head-to-head race.
Will, thank you. And up next, the director of that poll, Charles Franklin, gives us the numbers and historical context setting up this week's election. And welcome back. Sometimes taking a look back can be one way to understand what's next. And we're joined next by political analyst, longtime Marquette Law School poll director Charles Franklin. Charles, always great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you know, you do these polls. You did one in June, but the numbers are your thing. And based on the data that you're seeing, you know, region by region, what can we expect tomorrow night?
Well, I think, first of all, let's say that the poll in June was a while back, but it showed a really close race.
Right, and that's where we're at now.
And that's for the general, and it's also for the Republican gubernatorial race. So, close race. Region by region in the Republican side, there's been a long history of southeastern Wisconsin being the base for Republican winners, while the north and west of the state have mostly backed outsiders who have generally lost. But we do see a little difference. Rebecca Clayfish's strength when she ran for lieutenant governor was in that Milwaukee media market in the southeast. Whereas if we go all the way back to 2004, when Michaels last ran for something, he had real strength in the Green Bay area and the Fox Valley. And then if you went to the western part of the state, those were the regions that both Clayfish and Michaels lost in the past. So which one of them's going to pick that up? And how well will Rampton run, perhaps, in some of those Trumpier areas in the north and west of the state?
And see how that might impact Michaels. Mike Goucher touched on Newman, the Newman-Walker race from all those years ago. I didn't realize or didn't remember that discrepancy and how much Newman had won outstate.
And I confess, I had to go back and look it up myself. But that's exactly the example of Walker won the southeast really strongly. Newman did well in the north and west, and not badly in the Green Bay area. Republican primaries have long had this regional kind of split, and only occasionally does it become primarily a Green Bay versus other parts. It's almost always the southeast. But in this case, with two strong candidates, can Clayfish really get the kind of big margins in the southeast, or does Michaels eat into that? And conversely, she won in the Green Bay area in her lieutenant governor's race. Does she eat into some of his strength? So the bottom line is it's close and I don't know, but I'll be watching for their relative performance in the southeast and Green Bay, and then look at the rest of the state. Is that going lopsidedly?
Is there any reason really to watch the Senate race tomorrow? I hate to say foregone conclusion. It would seem Mandela Barnes is gonna win tomorrow, but are we already just looking ahead to the general?
Well, I think we certainly expect him to win. The three candidates that dropped out all endorsed him, so if they have any sway, then that's strong. And the other candidates have done a little bit of advertising and certainly a lot of campaigning. It will be a major story if Barnes does not rack up a major win.
And then what was your polling showing in June with regards to that race? Johnson against, at that point, I guess a hypothetical matchup with Mandela Barnes.
Barnes was 2 points ahead of Johnson, but that's well inside the margin of error. And in the governor's race, we had a 4-point lead for Evers over Clayfish and 7 points over Michaels. I think it's a little stronger for November on the governor's side, but a true toss-up, no matter who the nominee was going to be on the Senate side.
Is it going to be really? I mean, is there any? I used the word referendum on Trump, but is it more about the individual candidates, or how much do you think those endorsements will play a role tomorrow?
I think it's a mix of both of those things. Our best estimate from June was that the Trump endorsement was maybe worth 4 points for Michaels, but Scott Walker's endorsement of Clayfish was worth about 4 points for her. So it really looked like a wash on the endorsement side. And again, that was a long time ago, and those two endorsers have really ramped up their participation in the race in this last week.
I know. I'm excited to see the 91 days that follow. It's going to be wild. I know I'm sure you'll have some polls for us. What do you expect in those 91 days? I mean, it's going to be an onslaught of ads, and it's going to be a wild stretch.
It will be an onslaught of ads. I think both sides believe the other is vulnerable to attack ads, so I would expect to see an awful lot of attack ads. I also think we have two really important races here. One that determines whether state government will continue under divided government or whether we'll go to unified Republican government.
Right.
And so there are big policy implications of that. And on the Senate side, of course, it's control of the U.S. Senate that this is important for, though maybe that's a little more distant for everyday voters compared to the governor's race. So the governor's race might drive the turnout a little bit more, and the Senate race come along behind on turnout.
Well, it is going to be interesting. And Charles, as always, we appreciate your insight. It's always good to have you with us.
Thank you.
And still to come, stay with us. We'll be talking more about other statewide races on the Tuesday ballot. Lieutenant Governor, for example, State Treasurer and Secretary of State primaries in both parties, and a Republican primary for Attorney General. Arman Rahman looks at the GOP challengers hoping to face off against incumbent Attorney General Josh Kaul.
And people don't pay enough attention to this position.
Former State Representative Adam Jarko is running against Fond du Lac District Attorney Eric Toney and conservative lawyer Karen Mueller for a chance to beat current Democratic Attorney General Josh Kaul in November. Experts say a party switch in this seat could bring a power shift we haven't seen since the early 2000s.
And if you had a Republican Attorney General and a Republican Governor and a Republican legislature, I think you would see, a lot of new policies and new takes on issues.
Issues including public safety. According to the DOJ, crimes like homicide and car theft have gone up in the state in the past 3 years. Toney says that means the state's top cop should have experience prosecuting those crimes.
And I'm the only Republican candidate in our race for Attorney General that has ever prosecuted a case and used the resources of our Department of Justice.
Jarko is calling for more law enforcement spending.
We've put out a plan called our Make Wisconsin Safe Again plan, and it calls for fully funding our brave men and women in law enforcement because we have a crisis of morale, recruitment, and retention all across Wisconsin in law enforcement.
The next Attorney General will also be responsible for running the state's crime lab, which saw significant delays with DNA analysis in 2021. In a report, Attorney General Josh Kaul credited those delays in large part to short-term impacts of the pandemic.
The reality is Josh Kaul is taking in thousands of less items at our crime lab. He's testing thousands of less items, and he's taking longer to do it in most categories, including DNA. And that's a failure on his part during this period of historic violence and drugs.
But one of the state's most critical issues at hand for the AG's race is one law Josh Kaul specifically says he will choose not to enforce. Wisconsin's abortion ban from the 19th century, triggered by the U.S. Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade.
He's picking and choosing when he wants to enforce the rule of law. Now, I happen to be pro-life, endorsed by Wisconsin Right to Life as well as Wisconsin Family Action, but I made a commitment when I ran for DA that I would enforce the rule of law.
The job of the Attorney General is not a policy-making job. If you want to make policy, run for the state legislature. So if the legislature decides to make some changes to the 1849 law, then that is the law that we would uphold and defend.
Just some of the many issues on the Attorney General's plate waiting in November. In Madison, Arman Rahman, News 3 Now.
Now, depending on where you live, you may find primaries for the state Senate, where a third of the seats are up this year, and the state Assembly, where all of the seats are up. One that is sure to gather attention is in the 63rd Assembly District, where Assembly GOP leader Robin Vos is facing challenger Adam Steen, who has the endorsement of former President Donald Trump. And today, a new twist. Michael Gableman, who was hired by Vos to investigate the 2020 election, is now endorsing Steen as well. Gableman said in a robocall he recorded for the Steen campaign that Vos did not do enough regarding the 2020 investigation. Another race to watch is the Democratic race in the 3rd Congressional District in southwestern Wisconsin. All of the state's congressional seats, of course, are up this year, and Republicans are looking at the 3rd as one that could flip. Democrat Ron Kind is retiring after holding that seat for more than 20 years. Jordan Fremstad brings us the story of those vying to replace him.
Without a Democratic governor in Wisconsin, our state will be taken backward.
Tony Evers completely abused his executive power.
A person can figure out where politicians stand.
We're going to defend this country. Go USA!
Based on the letter written next to their names on a ballot.
Is there no plan with my colleagues on the Republican side in the state legislature, or is it going back to 1849?
But voters in western Wisconsin are not as predictable. Political analyst Joe Heim says to expect high stakes in Wisconsin's 3rd congressional district race.
It's pretty clear that is the #1 race in Wisconsin.
Incumbent Ron Kind has held the seat since 1997, the same year Titanic hit theaters and Brett Favre won a Super Bowl.
And Tawny and I now look forward to the next chapter in our life.
But now with his retirement.
And that makes it very competitive. If you add all the district votes for president, Donald Trump carried the district.
Kind's decision leaves Van Orden, who lost slightly in 2020, with another shot.
The reason why Ron Kind got reelected is some people voted for Trump and then switched over to vote for him.
The 3rd Congressional attracted Trump's coveted endorsement.
Hello, Wisconsin. It's great.
In 2020.
Straight red because we are the party of freedom. I hear good things, Dara. Got my total support.
The Trump endorsement in this kind of an area, especially with rural voters, means a bigger thing.
Van Orden carries his own baggage. He was at the January 6th insurrection, and in a 2015 book, he bragged about exposing a male lieutenant's genitals to female officers.
Those kind of things are going to be used against him in the election.
Van Orden can relax in the August primary because he's unopposed. 4 Democrats can't rest on the Democratic side. Brad Pfaff currently serves western Wisconsin in the state Senate. Mark Newman is a well-known lacrosse doctor and city council member. Deb McGrath is a former Army captain and CIA officer. Rebecca Cook is an Eau Claire small business owner and nonprofit leader. Pfaff holds a slight edge, but
he has not been really widely known as a person. You know, he doesn't have a lot of exposure.
However, Pfaff has an important ally.
I know that he recognizes that we have a broken political system today.
Congressman Kind came out very early to endorse him.
Pfaff beat a household name in Dan Kapanke, who held that Senate seat from 2004 to 2011.
4 more years, that's our game plan.
But there's a math problem Heim says doesn't add up.
He outspent Dan Kapanke 3 or 4 to 1. He won by 600 votes.
The National Journal ranks the 3rd as the most likely district in the country to flip. And ultimately, western Wisconsin voters can help decide which party controls the House in 2023.
The stakes are really high here.
For News 3 Now in La Crosse, I'm Jordan Fremstad.
3 things impacting this race: money, women voters after the reversal of Roe v. Wade, and the college voters with 8 major colleges and universities in that district. Still to come, we'll hear from the major Republicans vying for the governor's residence. That's coming up next. Welcome back. Of the primaries we will see tomorrow, probably the most hotly contested will be the Republican race for governor. While there are 3 candidates running, the race was largely narrowed down to 2 candidates after top-name national endorsements in the final weeks.
It's the race pitting 2 national figures against each other. Former President Donald Trump backing one candidate and former VP Mike Pence backing another. It's setting up the Republican gubernatorial primary as a fight over how much influence Trump still has in Wisconsin politics.
Certainly the Trump endorsement has been pretty good.
That's John Pudner, a political operative who's worked on Republican campaigns across the country.
You do have Republicans now do like the Trump agenda. I think there's a question on whether or not that means you want Trump again or you want someone else carrying his agenda.
The candidate carrying that agenda is Tim Michaels, a southeastern Wisconsin businessman.
She had my phone and she's like, Daddy, it's President Trump. He said, Tim, I'm going to endorse you because I think you're the only one that can win this. You're the guy that's the proven leader, the proven outsider.
Compare that to Rebecca Clayfish, the Pence-backed former lieutenant governor under Scott Walker.
I am the one who is tested and proven, dependable, and ready to go. I am the one who has won statewide 4 times.
That's what the candidates are bringing to the campaign. But if they win, where will they take the state? Well, in this campaign, questions over the integrity of the 2020 election continue to reign, spurred considerably by the presence of Donald Trump making an endorsement in the race. The former president has continued to reject the results of Wisconsin's elections, but the candidates don't see decertification of those results as a priority.
It's not a priority. My priorities are election integrity, crime reduction, and education reform. And then the continuous, always from day one until my last day in office, 4 years or 8 years later, to make sure that we have a robust economy here in Wisconsin.
I have said in the past that the 2020 election I feel was rigged. As your governor, I'll abolish the WEC. I will ban the use of ballot drop boxes. I will ban the use of central counts.
Also, a key focus of the race will be the issue of abortion. The overturning of Roe v. Wade was a big win for conservatives, but where do the candidates want to turn to next?
Being pro-life means being pro-woman and pro-baby. And as governor, I'm going to make sure that we treat new moms with unexpected pregnancies with empathy and compassion and get them the resources they need. Miscarriage care and ectopic pregnancy treatment are not abortion. Abortion is illegal. Ectopic pregnancy treatment and miscarriage treatment are not abortions.
Being pro-life is more than just being anti-abortion. Let's talk to them about adoption. Let's talk to them about monies that are available for infants and toddlers out there. That's what being pro-life means.
So how do candidates then plan to support children and parents after the child is born?
At Michaels Corporation, we do provide paid leave for both the husband and the wife. And here's what we need to do in Wisconsin.
Michael says he would support putting paid family leave in state law. Clayfish says she wants to help parents get back to work at the same time.
By making sure that we have child tax credits that flow through the employer so that the employee can keep more of his or her own hard-earned money.
Another likely motivating issue for Republican voters is crime and calls for bail reform, especially in the wake of the Waukesha parade tragedy.
It is bad district attorneys and bad judges who just let bad guys go with rap sheets a mile long to have a revolving door of criminal justice. That is why one of my very first steps is to pass bail and sentencing reform to take away discretion from bad district attorneys and bad judges.
We didn't have this problem. School shootings, mass shootings 40 plus years ago haven't changed. Society has changed.
The winner of this primary will face Governor Tony Evers in the fall. He's facing his first bid for re-election in a midterm year that is supposed to favor the other side.
Republicans probably have a bit of an edge going in this year, for this election at least.
Thank you all for joining us, and please remember to cast your ballot tomorrow. Polls open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. You can still register to vote at the polls. Just be sure to bring proof of residence. And since this is a primary election, you can only vote for one side of the ticket, Democrat or Republican, not both. You can also register at the polls, and you can hand deliver your absentee ballots that you haven't quite filled out yet. And you can find this program online as well at channel3000.com. I'm Eric Franke. Good night, and again, thanks for watching.